Hi good people, Titus here for another Unreal Engine tutorial, and in this one we're going to create a simple day and night cycle. Now this is going to be part one of a two-part series, and the first one we're going to create the sun and basically rotate it around and get our day-night working. In part two we will actually create a moon, and we'll have that rotating to kind of bring out our night scene basically. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. I have a basic default unlit scene, so you'll notice if I play it, it's very dark, can't really see anything, so let's go ahead and fix that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add a directional light. So we'll hit the plus sign for the get content here, and then we'll type in directional light. And then under that directional light, I'm going to hit F2 to rename it. And I'm going to add an underscore sun, because we're going to have two directional lights. We're going to have one that controls the sun, and we'll have one that controls the moonlight. Now if I go back into lit mode, you notice the scene is actually bright now. And I'm going to go ahead and reset the position here so it's at world origin. And real quick, I am going to minimize these and get rid of this to bring up the view a little bit. There we go, so it's a little bit cleaner. Now with the directional light selected, you can press Ctrl-Alt-L, and you can rotate your directional light around to get different lighting effects. Alternatively, you can just simply come into the inspector and rotate along an axis to get different lighting effects that way as well. So this is how we're going to be driving the logic for the day and night cycle. We're basically going to rotate this directional light. To be able to make that happen, you need to switch it from stationary to movable. So don't forget to do that, otherwise this isn't going to work. You'll notice the sky is still dark. That's because we don't have like a height fog, atmosphere, all the other stuff you'd expect from an environmental light mixer. The way we're going to do that is we're actually going to use an old blueprint in the engine folder called BP_SkySphere. I think it was from UE4, but it's going to simplify the process. So we don't have to adjust those various settings individually. We can just have one single blueprint to reference, so it makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to open up my content drawer, and then I have the engine folder. If you don't see this, and I am going to hide myself, just click the settings here, and then check the box to show engine content, and that should show up. Inside the folder, I'll search for BP Sky Sphere. Then we just drag this in, and then just like that, you kind of already have a working sky sphere. Now the parameters in the inspector, I'll kind of go through them real quick. The big one is the sun height. As you increase this value closer to 1, the sun starts to make its appearance as it basically shows up in the sky. A value of 1 is when it's basically at its peak. When it's at its peak, it is going to set the sky color to be the zenith color. So whatever color you set here, this will be kind of like your general sky color. As you bring that value down, you're going to get like more of the orangey color, and then as you bring it kind of negative, you'll see the night sky kind of show up. Now, if you want the stars to kind of pop, you can set the star brightness to a higher value, like 1, and that'll kind of make them kind of stand out. You can also increase the cloud opacity to like 1 to make them more visible. And you can adjust the cloud speed to something like 5, so you get some little bit more pronounced movement in the clouds, and that can bring your scene alive a little bit. If we bring the sun back up, you also can adjust the sun brightness, although I find a value of 50 works pretty good. If you go negative, you can create a black sphere in the sky, so if that's what you're looking to do for some type of solar eclipse or something. Yeah, I think I'm going to set that back to 50. That works good for me. Now we are not going to be, you certainly could set this value manually through like a timeline, or just adjust it through code directly. The problem with doing it that way is you would need to set your directional light to be a rotation that kind of matched that, so your shadows are correct. So basically you don't have your sun's in one position but your shadows are kind of like inverted, and it doesn't really make sense. So the blueprint comes with a function that kind of does that math for you. Near the top there is a directional light actor. You can just point this to be your directional light sun, and then it'll use the rotation of the directional light to adjust the position of the sun so your shadows are correct. So I recommend doing it that way. It's just a little bit easier. However, when you set this, make sure your colors determined by sun is checked. You'll also notice you cannot adjust the sun height. That is because that is now being driven by the directional light. So you would have to rotate the directional light to some value. And then when you go back to the sky sphere, there is a refresh material. You'd have to check that. And it redoes the calculation to, you notice the sun's right there, reposition the sun and adjust the sky color accordingly. Now we're of course going to be doing this through code. So I was just kind of giving a brief overview of how it works there. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to be doing this through the level blueprint. So let's go here and open the level blueprint. And then we will also dock this in our main window. Now I'm going to create a custom event. So we'll do add custom event. And we're just going to call this one the sun. When we make the part 2, we will create another custom event called moon. And then from our begin play, we will simply call sun, and we'll eventually call moon, but that'll be in a later part. Now off the custom event, we are just going to add a simple timeline. You can drive the logic however you want. I just really like timelines because they're, super easy. So I'm going to call this timeline underscore sun, and you can use the play or you can pop this in the play from start. It does not matter. And then basically we just need to rotate that directional light, right? So what we can do is you can click and select your directional light, go back to your level blueprint, right click, and you'll have an option to create a reference to that directional light. From there, you can pull off that pin into a set world rotation. It'll make a reference to the light component, so we'll just drag that down there. And then you can create, you can actually make a rotator. I'm just going to split this, and I'm just going to be appending one of these axes, So for the light actor, it seems like the Y is the way to go. The X doesn't really seem to do a whole heck of a lot. The Z does a little bit. So you can kind of play with whatever effect or whatever light effects you want. I'm just going to go with the Y axis for now. So I'll be adjusting the pitch in this case. To set up our timeline, you just have to double click it, and then it'll open up the timeline settings there. And then we're going to add a single float track. So click track, add float track, and then I'm going to call this the sun rotation. Now your day and night cycle will depend on your prototype, whatever you're building. Some people, they want maybe a full 24-hour day-night cycle. Maybe you want a 12-hour, a 6-hour, a 1 hour, 30-minute, 10-minute. For this demo, I'm just going to do a 1 minute or 60 seconds. Whatever timeline you decide on, you can use the values I'm giving you. You're just going to have to, scale it up appropriately. So this one's going to have 2 key values. So we'll right-click, add a key value. First one's going to be at 0, 0. And then the second one will be at the end of our timeline. In my case, it's 60. And then the value will be 359. So why did I use 359? We're dealing with rotations. And for Unreal Engine, the value 0 and the value 360 is the same in regards to rotation. It's the same position. So if I go from 0 to 360, I will end up at the same spot I was when I started at 0. So basically it's a full rotation, right? So basically I'm going to 359, and when that rolls to 360 or 0, it's going to be in the same position. So that'll basically get us where we need to be. Now if I compile, I can come back here and my timeline has this new sun rotation pin. So I just simply plug this in. I'm going to be using the pitch, and then I'll plug in the update into the execution pin here, and that almost gets me to complete. Now this will not update the sky sphere because remember, when we were doing it, we needed to hit the refresh material. So we still need to do that here as well. So what we can do is we can select the sky sphere, go into level blueprint and right click, create a reference to the sky sphere, and then when you drag off, you can access any of those component values inside the inspector. So in this case, it was what was it? Refresh material. So we can call refresh material, and then it'll redo that draw call and kind of reposition the sky and make sure all the lighting's good for us. So if we compile and save this, it doesn't matter what values you set in the level, the timeline will override that. So when we play, you'll notice the sky is light and it's turning dark. And another thing to note is the light is coming from the ground. So that is because the sun is directly underneath our feet. But you'll see the sky is completely dark, so we are going to have to address the light bleed issue. But I think it's going to come up from over there based on the rotation. Yeah, the way the shadows are moving, I think the sun's going to rise over there. But you see our night sky is kind of going away. Oh, there's the sun. And then as it reaches the top, it's going to turn to the zenith color, which is that blue. And then it'll basically continue to do its rotation all the way around, so forth and so on, until we go back into darkness. And it's basically, I don't remember if I checked the loop. We might have forgot to do that, so we might still need to do that. So this might actually stick right here. Yeah, I think it's stuck right there. So if we exit out, let's go back to our timeline. Yeah, there's a loop button. We'll want to make sure we check that so it continues and redoes the loop. But we had another issue. We had an issue with light bleed. So there's a few ways you can address this. There's the cheap and dirty way, which I'll show you right now. We can just hit the add button here and we could do a basic shape, choose a cube, and then I'm just going to position that cube at world origin. And then I'm going to drop it down to be like -1000. And then I'm going to scale it in the X and the Y by like 1000 by 1000. It creates this giant cube underneath our basically our world level. And then when we play, that cube is going to block out all the light, which you can see there's no light bleed anymore. So that's one quick and dirty way you can deal with light bleed, is you can literally just put an object to block it. That's not always feasible depending on your situation, so I will show you another way to handle it as well. So looks like our sun is coming over, and yeah, it looks like this is all working. So let me show you another way to deal with that. So let's delete our cheap and dirty cube and go into our directional light. So the light bleed is happening from the directional light. The intensity of the directional light is 10. Another way we can address this is we basically lower the intensity. So bring the light bulb down. So depending on the position of the light bulb, or the sun in this case, if it's below the horizon, we'll maybe want to set the intensity to 0 or maybe 1. So it's such a low value that you're not going to get that light bleed through your complex messages here. And that's just another way to deal with that. So let's do that. So we'll go back into our level blueprint, go to the event graph here. I'm going to disconnect this and pop it back a bit. Off the light component, we can drag off and do set the intensity value. So now we just need to figure out how to drive our intensity. So there's a few ways you can do this. The way I did it is I just added a print string, and then I was printing out the sun's rotation, and I was just visibly looking at when it was bright, when it was dark, and I was writing down values. Like it was bright at 170 or 180, and then it was at its brightest around 270, and then it's basically dark from like 320 all the way to like 150 based on that rotation. So that's basically how I did it. You can do it however you want. But we need to add in a new track. So we're going to click add track. We'll do add float track here. And this will be our intensity. So we'll add our first keyframe will be at 0, 0. Our second keyframe is going to be at 30, 0. If I go to 30 on this timeline, you see how the value is 182. So at value 180 is when the sun just peaks across the horizon. That's when it starts basically, it's above the surface. It's just starting to light up the night sky. So I want this to be 0 all the way up until that point, basically. And then I'm going to add a keyframe at 43, and our intensity value is, it's defaulted to 10. We're using 10 as our max, kind of like our max value. The reason I chose 43 is because on this timeline, value 43 corresponds to 260. So 260 is where the sun was completely in the noon position. And like I said, you can get these values by hooking up a print string and just having it printed along as the sun moves around. You just, take a note and you can figure out your positioning from there. And then from there, I can add a final keyframe at time 60, and we'll set it to a lower value of 1, just so it's almost 0. It's just basically making its way down there, and then that should be good enough for this timeline. Now what we can do is set this intensity into our new intensity value here, and then we can hook up our refresh material. And just like that, I think we are good with our day and night cycle. So if we hit play here, you see we do not have any more light bleed. The cube has been deleted. We are seeing our beautiful night sky. Now when it's night, it's still obviously too dark, so we're going to be adding a second directional light. We'll do that in a part 2, and that'll drive our moonlight. And we'll also create a moon, and we'll have the moon rotating in the sky too, because I think that'll look pretty cool. But light bleed's good. Now the intensity of the sun should start picking up. So basically it's going to start increasing. There it is. And as it makes its way to the max value, it's going to go to a value of 10 where it's at its brightest. And then it'll kind of dip down from there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So, all right, everyone, I think we will cut the video here, but I hope you found some informative value that you can take into your own projects. But as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.